Okay, so once you've got your chapel drawn onto your watercolour paper, canvas, mixed media paper, whatever you've chosen to use, we are going to do the background without the stars first. Okay, so we need to mix a sort of pale pink colour, a little bit of orange, some blues, purples and some blacks. So get a palette. I'm using the palette that I used this morning. Clean water. And mix your colours in advance because we're going to put them all down at once. So you need, oops, that's no good. You need some white and a little bit of red for the pink colour. Just check and see if that's in the right place again. Yeah, I think it is. Okay. Sorry, I just dripped a bit of water on my work surface. Okay, let's start again. Here we go. So, little bit of white. We've got some red there already for the pink. We can mix a bit of yellow with the pink colour to make a orangey colour, and then we're going to go into the blues. So we've got a bit of cerulean blue here. You can use cerulean or cobalt, and then I will move into the ultramarine just a little bit again. You don't need a great deal. This is an old tube, so it's quite difficult to get the blue out. And then into the black. I've got a bit of black squeezed out already, but I'm probably going to need a bit more than that. Okay, so there we go. So you've got white, cerulean blue, ultramarine, yellow, red, black. That should be it, really. Okay, so starting with the white colour. So this is acrylic. I'm just going to take a little bit of white, a tiny bit of water. I'm just going to put that down the bottom of the sky, just here. And that's just to retain the brightness in that area. Okay, I'm just wetting it down really, just a little bit there as well, like that. And then I'm going to add a tiny bit of yellow into the mix. So I'm just using the excess paint that's on my brush. My yellow is quite acidic, so it's not the best yellow to use, but you know, you have to use what you've got. So I'm just going to put a touch of that down here, pat it in like that. And then I'm going to add a bit of red to the yellow to create a sort of orangey tone. So it's quite a pale orange. We're just going to pat that in around it like that, all the way across the top of the church. Don't worry about getting marks on the church if you get them on the church, because that will be painted over, and because we're using acrylic you don't need to worry so much. Okay, then we're going to put a tiny bit of just red in, just red. A little bit, there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to take a clean brush. Let's see now, what have I got? This little brush here, and I'm just going to smooth it. So it's a clean dry brush. I start with the white area. I'm just going to use the white area and then move up into the orange. Just going to smooth it out, blending it together. Can you see, like that? Once you've got paint on your brush, just wipe it off because otherwise you'll drag it down into your white areas and we don't want that. So every now and again just wipe the brush off and then continue upwards like this. Okay, that'll do. Now this is where we move into the other colours. So I'm going to take a little bit of cerulean blue and add it into that purple, that peachy colour. And we're doing this so that we get a nice graduation of tone. So rather than going straight in with the blue, we put this tone in. I'm just going to paint around my spire, bell tower, whatever you want to call it. Bit of that. And then a bit more cerulean blue into the mix. Further up, like that. So you know, you're building up your layers, and then start adding in a touch of ultramarine so it starts to darken. Try not to use too much water, but you do need some water, otherwise it won't blend. Up into the blue. Turn your brush over, get rid of your paint that's on the brush, and then we're up into the real ultramarine tones. But once you get to this stage, you really need to dry brush it again. Okay, so take your dry brush, start at the bottom, and just start to blend those colours together into one another. Dry your brush off. Try not to get too much of the blue down into that orange area. We do want some of it there, like around that area there, but try not to drag too much blue down into the orange like that. And then carry on further up and just push the colours around. If they've dried out, then add some further paint, like there. It's a bit dry. Just push the colours around until they blend together. Wipe your brush off, dry it off as you move between the tones. You can see this is drying already. It's already drying out. It's very warm in here. So again, just add some more paint back in and it will move. Okay, try not to add water because water will just lift the paint off. Okay. Again, you've got to work quite quickly here. So you can see I'm adding some more paint in to the areas that have dried. Try and be careful down the bottom part so it doesn't move too far down. Like that. Dry brush. Wipe off excess paint if you feel like that's what it needs. Try not to use too much water. I'm going to add a little bit more paint up here, but I'm going to do that with my bigger brush. And we're going to move from the ultramarine into the black. I'm going to put some big lumps of paint. I'm just going to put them in the center part here. Okay, and I'm going to take the black and I'm going to put that along the top like this, all the way along the top, and then start to drag it down. And if you've got colours on your brush, don't worry. Now you can use your bigger brush now just to bring these two colours together. Wipe off the black as much as possible, like that. Get rid of it on those white areas, and then you can start to push this blue around now, just in that central spot. and then down into the bottom. I'm going to put a little bit more blue just here and here, just so that we don't get that dominant black colour. You want to work down the bottom part. It's really warm in here. It's drying off like nobody's business. I think the temperatures have gone up in the last couple of days. Okay, I'm going to go back to this dry brush now just to get this blending just in this area here and down here. Be careful when you move from the black to the blue. Do the top section first and then come down and use a really dry clean brush and just blend this excess blue into the lower sections. So again, this takes a bit of practice. If you want to practice on a separate piece of paper, then go ahead before you apply it to your finished piece. Okay, so I can see that there is a little bit of separation just here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some of the ultramarine blue and I'm just going to pat it back in on the line between the black and the blue and just sort of extend it upwards. Can you see how I'm doing that? Just extend it upwards into the blue like that, and hopefully that'll solve that issue between the blue and the black. Okay, there we go. And you can keep adding paint. So where there's little patches that you're not happy with, maybe you can add some more paint in. Just again, steer clear of the water and you'll be fine. You'll see if you add water that your paint will misbehave. All right, just pat a little bit more colour in if you want it in areas. Remember to maintain that colour separation like that, just by adding different shades in here and there. I quite like to see the paint marks. Again, if you want to not have so many paint marks, then just blend them. You can thicken up this sort of, oops, I made a green because I've got blue on my brush. This orangey colour that's in the distance. You can tap a bit more colour in there if you wanted to. Just a touch. Add some white to it, and then that will help you to blend the colour in to what's going on around it. Just sort of make small tap marks like this. And you can see that there's a very light area just here, so I'm just going to add a bit more white just to bring that out a bit more. Can you see, like that? Okay, now I'm quite happy with that, so I'm going to leave that alone. The next thing to do, I'm hoping yep, we're okay, is to cover the foreground in a dark colour. Now you can just go for black if you want to. You can soften the black by adding some blue into it. You can add some brown into it. It's up to you really what colour you want to make. I use Payne's Grey a lot, and Payne's Grey is just black and blue mixed together. So I'm mixing some ultramarine blue into my black colour. And the reason why we do this is because black tends to be a bit flat. So, and I'm just going to put it all over everywhere apart from the gravestones and the chapel. Okay, maybe use a smaller brush for this job than what I've got here. Try and paint around that gravestone if you can. I mean, you don't really need to paint round the gravestones and things like that. You can always pop them back in later. I'm going to go up to the wall. But no further, because I'm going to do the distant landscape a slightly different colour, just because it's nearer to the sun, where the sun is set, and there would be an element of light there. Okay, again, if the paint is too thin, just apply another layer. That will do one thing. You can always let it dry and apply another layer afterwards. But this dark area here is where the drama comes from in the picture. Okay, so I need a fine brush now. And I'm going to go within with the fine brush, and I'm just going to put a touch of paint just in between these areas where it's really fiddly. Like that. Don't forget these. It's really important that you get them in. I'm going to go around this gravestone here. And that's the wall with a little gateway. And it's nice to have that gateway because it does give your eye somewhere to go. It's a compositional tool to allow your eye to go through that gateway and out into the distant landscape. Now, what do we do with the distant landscape? All I would do is take a little bit of blue, a little bit more blue than the black, and lighten up the black tone with that. So this bit in between here, and you might not be able to see the difference between the two tones on your palette, but when you apply the paint you can really see it, the addition of blue. So that would go in there like so. And then again, just add almost blue, no black in at all, for the sea, which is just here. Again, do it with a detailed brush. I mean, you might be working slightly larger than me. I'm working A5. You might not have as fiddly an area as this. Okay, so that's that done. I'm leaving my church. Actually, no, what I'll do is I will colour my church roof in. Now, the roof would be grey slate. So again, it's a black mixed with blue colour. And with a touch, I would put a touch of white into it, a very small touch of white, just to give it a slight softness. Again, use this detailed brush because you want to get these marks as accurate as possible. I mean, it's a very old church, so you know it's going to have lumps and bumps in it. So it's not the same as painting a modern building, but you still want that accuracy. And as a lot of people know this chapel, Munt Chapel, you want to get it looking like it. It's a really beautiful place to visit. If you've not visited, go and have a look, especially over the summer. My line is going slightly off there. So, okay. Not sure whether you can hear, but there is a slight humming noise. And that's because I have bees nesting in the wall of my studio. And they're on the other side, thankfully. They've come in from the outside through a hole. So they're on the other side of the wall. But it's amazing the sound they make. Not a lot of them in there. I don't know what sort of bees they are. They're not honey bees. But it's just a constant hum. It's really quite lovely. And as long as they don't come in the studio, I'll be fine. Right, so we're going to mix a sort of purpley grey. So all I'm doing is I'm putting a bit of red into the grey that I've used for the roof. And then I'm just going to add a bit of white to that. Oops, probably a bit much. Okay, so that's basically red, white, blue and black. And we're going to pop that on this wall here. I'm not sure whether it's light, it's not, it needs to be lighter. See, until you put colours down, you don't really know if they're the right shade. They look completely different on your palette. So just be aware of that. That's not too bad actually. The chapel is white, but obviously because the sun has set, those white shades would turn to greys and then to blacks according to what time of day it is. So I think we're okay still. Try and keep that ridge if you can. Down the edge. You can use a square brush for this job. If you've got a small square brush, then you could use that. It would make matters much easier for getting into corners with a square brush. There we go. And then up into the bell tower. My paint is not flowing very well, so I'm just adding a dot of water in, not too much. Remember, less water with acrylic. It will not behave itself if it's too watery. Careful where you're resting. If you want to dry things off, then do that first and then continue to paint. If you haven't got anywhere to rest your hand, there. Again, if it's patchy, you can go over it again later on. Now look at your gravestones. Are there any gravestones that you can paint in this colour? Yes, there are. That one. While you've still got it on your brush, you might as well use it. This one. And this is where you can redraw things if you need to. This one, if they're not quite big enough, or if you've gone over a bit with your black, then you can cover things up. This one can go in there. And then the darker ones, just pick up a little bit of excess black that you've got there on your palette, dot those in. So actually, practically, you could leave the chapel, the white of the paper or the canvas if you wanted to. You might not want to do that, so literally, once you've got your gravestones in, and can you see they're slightly different colour to what we've put on the ground? So, are we all right still? Yep. Okay. So let's have a look. We wouldn't see shadows necessarily on the ground, but I am going to put a wall in down the foreground here. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to mix a black. I'm going to take the black. I'm going to add some of this blue into it. Mainly because I've got it on the palette. No other reason. I'm just going to use all this paint up that I've got here. And mix a bit of red into it. Like that. That sends it off on the brown side. You can't really see it on the palette, but it is there. And it will be different. Pick up all the paint on your brush, and the wall comes down like this. And then there's a gap where the gate is. Okay. And we wouldn't paint a wall all the way across. We just wouldn't do that because that would block the eye. So we're going to put a gate just here. Like that. And there's our wall. And if you wanted to, you could take different shades, add a bit more red, and just pat in some marks like this. You don't want much because remember it's dark. You can't really see all the individual rocks. I'm just going to move this up a bit. You might not be able to see what I'm doing. That make up this stone wall. Bit of blue maybe. Just here and there, just the odd, especially on top, you can put some of the sort of lumpy bits like that. I don't know what they're called. I think I don't know whether they all are called capstones or something. I don't know. The top bits of the... So can you see, I'm just using my brush horizontally and vertically to create some different rock shapes, which this wall is made up from. Just like that. No other detail. You really don't need any more detail than that. Now I need my fine brush, really fine brush, and I'm going to put in the edges of these gravestones. So we might see an edge on that one, just like that. And I'm doing this with black. Just a really fine brush. Just put the sides on the gravestones. I'm hoping you can see that. I'm going to put a little bit on the inside of the window. I'm going to put a shadow on the side of that. Maybe a bit there, like that. In the bell tower, I don't know whether you can see a bell actually, but let's put the edge of the bell tower in. We should be able to see something in there, so I'm going to put a sort of a shape like that. Okay. Along this edge, just this edge, because we would see the roof edge. And there's a little shadow just coming down that side there. Maybe a little bit along the bottom, bit there. Along the top edge of that landscape, I'm just going to put a line. Okay. I'm going to leave the chapel just as exposed paper. If you want to paint it, then go ahead. All right, just going to get a little touch of white and use the dirt on my paintbrush just to put a highlight on the edges of these gravestones like this. So it's not white. Can you see like that? I'm also going to put a little bit of white just along that top, so it's more like grey really than white. Like same, I'm just going to put a bit along the top of that hill and a bit on the tops of some of these walls. Again, don't be tempted to outline, just dot it here and there, yeah, like that. I hope that's enough. Okay, so now all you need to do is dry it off. So give it a hair dry or leave it and go and have a cup of tea. Okay, here comes the fun bit. You need to cover, just a scrap of paper will do, cover the bottom up to the top of the bell tower on the chapel. And then anything around the edge that you don't want paint on, you need to cover that as well. I've got a mat here, and I paint onto it, so it's fine. A piece of newspaper will be fine. Then you need an acrylic brush or a toothbrush, and you need some white paint, and you need to water it down. Now, I suggest that you have a play with this technique before you do it on another piece of paper, because you have to get it right. Okay, so you need to get it like a single cream consistency, and it doesn't matter if it's a bit sort of off colour. I don't know whether you can see that, but there was a bit of colour on my brush and it's just gone a bit off colour. It's better if it's not pure white. Okay, and all you do is you flick, hold your brush above your work and you flick like this. So we're going to try and get more stars in the middle of this picture than on the outside. So hold it near to where you want the stars and flick. Again, like I said, it takes practice, but it's a really nice technique. And you can move up the middle a bit, but we don't, less stars here, more stars in the middle. Okay, and also if you add a little bit of blue or something into the mix, so a tiny bit of blue or even a bit of red, it just makes for a more interesting mix of colour. So you've got some white and some blue, sort of off-white blue. I'm just going to come down a touch. I'm just going to put some a bit lower down, mainly because I'm trying not to get them on my chapel. There, that's it. Okay, and don't go mad. All right, take your sheet off, wipe your hands off, decide if you've got enough. What you can do is, if you've got a detail brush, you can add in some more defined stars. So you can sort of come in and just put the odd dot here and there like this that is slightly larger, but again, don't go mad, because it really does show if it's overdone. But these different tones of blue and white, you can see how strong that white is. Try and control the size of your stars. But this is just an option if you want some bigger marks on your work, especially if you're working larger. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. You might want to come back in and let's have a look at the whole thing. Okay, you might want to come back in, add some extra sky colour. You might want to add an extra layer here. You know, it's up to you. Okay, enjoy. Remember to practice this splattering technique before you put it onto your final picture, and you should be fine. All right, bye for now. See you next time. Have a good week.